So this is Bhagavad-Gita as it is. Second chapter entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. Today we'll be discussing text number 70, close to the end of the chapter. So please repeat. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudramapa pravishanti advata tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantamapnoti na kamakami apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudramapa pravishanti advat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantam apnoti na kamakami apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudramapa pravishanti advat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantamapnoti na kamakami. Apuryamanam, always being filled. Achala pratishtham, steadily situated. Samudram, the ocean. Apaha, waters. Pravishanti, enter. Yadvat, as. Tadvat, so. Kamaha, desires. Yam, unto whom. Pravishanti, enter. Sarve, all. Saha, that person. Shantim, peace. Apnoti, achieves. Na, not. Kama, kami, one who desires to fulfill desires. Translation. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Please repeat. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Although the vast ocean is always filled with water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water. But the ocean remains the same, steady. It is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. A Krishna-conscious man is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Therefore, he's like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of the rivers that flow into the ocean. But he is steady in his activities, and he's not even slightly disturbed by the desires for sense gratification. That is the proof of a Krishna-conscious man. One who has lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desires are present. Because he remains satisfied in the transcendental, loving service of the Lord, he can remain steady, like the ocean, and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who want to fulfill desires even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. The fruitive workers, the salvationists, and also the yogis who are after mystic powers are all unhappy because of unfulfilled desires. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord, and he has no desires to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from the so-called material bondage. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires. Therefore, they are in perfect peace. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudram apa praveshanti yadvat tadvat kama yam praveshanti sarve sashantim apnoti na kama kami. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So this is a description that Krishna gives here of our ideal. Raise your hand if you've attained this state. You've noticed perhaps it's not so easy. But that is exactly what sets apart the transcendentalist from the mundaner. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti sanyami yasyam jagarti bhutani sa nisha pashyato munehi. We've read already. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. The acharyas commenting on this verse point out that this qualification is further described in the following verse. Vihaya kaman yah sarvan pomam sharati nispridha nirmamo nirahankaraha sashantim adhigachati. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, and who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can achieve or attain real peace. So we would like to be like the ocean. And Srila Prabhupada writes, especially during the rainy season, the ocean is always filled with so much more water. And not just water. Because what is the condition of rivers in the rainy season? What are they full of? all the gunk. Whatever is being washed off the land, it goes into the rivers and it goes downstream and it ends up in the ocean. And the ocean has to tolerate this. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Trinadapi sunichena, Turodapi sunishnana, Amanina manadena, Kirtaniya sadaharihi. If you think it's a tall order to be more peaceful and still and unagitated and full as the ocean, then just try being more humble than the blade of grass, more tolerant than the tree. I was on the Parikrama Marg yesterday, and I walked just near the intersection, Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg. You'll see that there are 2 old tree stumps, and by all appearances they're dead. Sometimes you can't tell with trees, but it seems like they're dead. There's no leaves on them. It doesn't appear that there have been leaves on them for the last decade or so. Completely dried out. Maybe the tree is still alive, but maybe not, but in either case, it takes a lot of tolerance. It takes a lot of tolerance. Or, in Los Angeles, just near our temple in Los Angeles, there are some trees on the street. And I was noticing one day, in Los Angeles, because people pay taxes, therefore the city comes out and maintains the landscape in the city in various places. So that includes cutting off the branches that get in the way of the traffic or get in the way of houses and they may pose some danger. So I looked at this tree one day and I counted there were 32 places where a branch had been cut off of this tree. We don't even have 32 limbs. We only have 2 or 4 limbs. And if one of them is cut off, it's a huge event. 32. This is what it means to be a tree. People cut them down, people cut off their limbs. If they don't cut them down, they carve their initials in them. Grass. We walk on the grass. What is lower than your foot? The sole of your foot. And that's what the grass takes upon its head. Because the grass has this other characteristic. Amanina, manadena. Manada. Ready to offer respect to all others. Even if you don't require respect, and most of us require some degree of recognition, respect, profit, adoration, distinction. These things are important to us when we're conditioned souls. This whole verse is about that fact, because when we don't get these things, then we feel slighted, we're uneasy at best, agitated at worst. Sometimes people go crazy, actually. They commit violent crimes. One man in Orissa, he was a high school principal, and he was, the way these things work, we all know in the professional world, through some sort of politics, he was taken out of his position and replaced with someone else. He couldn't tolerate it. For a year he was quiet, then he came back and he found the person who was responsible and indirectly, not even responsible, but related to the person who was responsible, and he bombed him. A few days after his wedding. This is a news story, current. So, amanina, amani, to be amani without the desire for some recognition or respect. Actually, later on in this Bhagavad-Gita, when Krishna describes what are the qualifications of a person who goes back to Godhead, this is the first thing he says. Niramana. Niramana moha jita sangha dosha. You all know the verse. What is the rest of it? Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha. And? Dvanvair vimuktaha sukha dukkha sangher gacchantya murha panam avyayam tat. If you want to go to that place where you are unbewildered, this is the first qualification. To give up the desire for mana. Samma. Shakale shamman korite shakti dehonata jatajata. Bhaktivinoda Thakur also prays to his spiritual master, please give me the potency that I can actually do this. Because what is the definition of envy according to Sridhar Swami in the first canto of the Bhagavatam? Parotkarashasah. You cannot tolerate when another person shines. You cannot tolerate that. You see? This is what it means to be envious. So, to give respect, Prabhupada tells the story, to be envious actually means that suppose someone is sitting as a high court judge, someone that you're very familiar with, someone you've known for a long time, suddenly he's catapulted into a position of great prestige and respect, and maybe pay as well. Then you cannot tolerate it if you're envious. So you say things like, well, he may be a high court judge, but certainly he's not being paid. We like to minimize, you see. So, parotkarashasaha. All right, so all these things are antithetical to the principle that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was given, which results in this kind of peace that we're hearing in today's verse. That principle is that you have to be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than the tree, ready to give respect to others and not expecting any honor in return. All right, so we're not quite there yet. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on this verse, he says, what is the end result here? Sashantim apnoti. He gets peace. What is that peace? Who has any idea about this? What does it mean to get this peace? What is that peace?
It means that we would be so absorbed in Krishna consciousness we don't care about it.
We don't care about what's happening around us because we're so absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur glosses the word Shantim as Jnana. In the beginning chapters of Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna is talking about Atma Gyan. This is called entry-level spiritual life. We're not exactly in pure devotional service yet, as I mentioned, but the prerequisite, just like when we're in college, you have prerequisites for certain courses that you want to take. If you take a foreign language course, for example, you have to have some idea of the grammar, that the prerequisite is there. You cannot take a language in poetry if you don't even know grammar. Indians don't know about these things because Indians don't study humanities anymore. But in science, if you don't even know arithmetic or algebra, then there's no question of calculus or physics or anything else. This is the idea. Indians are more in science. So the prerequisite for Krishna consciousness, the prerequisite for gaining this satisfaction and absorption in Krishna consciousness, which is characterized by this humility that we've discussed, that prerequisite is jnana. It's called tattva jnana or atma jnana. We have to have some idea of what is spiritual life. A person who is not spiritual cannot really take to Krishna consciousness. So then what is the prerequisite for this spiritual realization? Jnana. It's also called mukti in other places, liberation, brahmabhuta jnana. What is the prerequisite for that? We're not there yet. This is only chapter 2. Krishna was beginning on this level of jnana, but in the beginning of chapter 3, Arjuna asks him a very pertinent question. Who knows what that question is? What does Arjuna ask Krishna next? Just in a couple of verses from now, he asks Krishna a question. What is it? I'll read it. O Janardhan, Keshava, why do you want me to engage in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? It's a sensible question. My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Please, therefore, tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. He's confused because Krishna is on the one hand talking about Atma Gyan, and on the other hand he's urging Arjuna to fight. And Arjuna sees that it seems to be contradictory. He wants to know what's happening. So Krishna begins on this level trying to bring Arjuna to the spiritual platform. But Arjuna asks this question that kind of requires some discussion about why it's necessary to fight the battle at Kurukshetra. Who knows why it's necessary to fight this battle at Kurukshetra? Why did Krishna want this to happen? We know Arjuna's fighting because Krishna wants him to fight, but why does Krishna want it to happen? Why does Krishna want the Pandavas to defeat the Kurus in this case? There must be a reason for it. What is it? Because it's dharma. There is such a thing as dharma. And another word for dharma is karma. Therefore, chapter 3 begins with karma yoga. The foundation of Gyan Adhikar is actually karma. In order to come to the stage of any sort of spiritual realization, you have to be a civilized human being, and that means that you have to understand what is dharma, and you have to act in accordance with dharma. It's many times been observed about Hinduism in particular that you can believe pretty much anything you want, and it's certainly possible to interpret the Vedas in any number of ways. But when it comes down to what you're going to do, there you have no choice at all. That's karma, otherwise known as dharma. Because if it's not dharma, then what does it automatically become by default? It becomes adharma, sinful. And that only takes you down, we know. Adho gachanti tamasaha. When someone acts in the mode of ignorance, or as Krishna says in chapter 16, when somebody dispenses with what the injunctions of the Shastra ordain, then what happens to him? Anybody know the verse? Yash Shastra vidham utsrujya vartate kama karataha nasa siddhim avapnoti na sukham na param gatim. He doesn't get any sort of perfection, he doesn't become happy, and he certainly doesn't get the supreme. See? So the very beginning of human life actually means to simply obey. We get an injunction from the Shastra, and we follow that instruction. When we do this consistently and properly, when we're guided, and when we're therefore elevated to the mode of goodness, then we can think about what is higher than karma. Because karma always entails some sort of reaction, and any sort of reaction, good or bad, it means another birth, and another birth means at least 4 things. What is that? Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. And certainly another 3 things on top of that. Adhibhautik Klesh, Adhidaivik Klesh, Adhyatmik Klesh. So many kinds of sufferings. So karma is necessary to bring us to the level of jnana adhikar. And jnana is necessary to bring us to the level of devotional service. Here in his purport, Srila Prabhupada, as he always does, he uses this stock phrase that you will find any number of times throughout his books. He says, transcendental loving service. What does that imply? Transcendental loving service. Number 1, it has to be transcendental. If it's not transcendental, then it's either karma or something. Spiritual means transcendental. So we have to have realized what is the nature of spirit, and we have to have realized our own identity as spirit in order to practice devotional service. And in order to come to that platform of tattva gyan or atma gyan, we have to be civilized human beings, which means we have to follow the rules. And we have to cultivate piety. To cultivate piety essentially means, or at least results, in coming to the mode of goodness. What are the characteristics of sattva guna, the mode of goodness? We can see everything very clearly. We're not bewildered anymore. We're peaceful, like this verse describes. We have knowledge. Krishna says, in fact, all the gates of the body are illumined by awareness. How many gates are there? 9 gates. Those who practice yoga, they consciously cultivate awareness of the workings of this material body. Now, someone can say that is bodily absorption, but actually it has some value. Because without awareness, whatever you put into Krishna consciousness is whatever you get out of it. If you have a higher level of awareness to invest in the process of Krishna consciousness, then you get a higher return from that as a result of that. This is the importance of sattva guna. We become civilized human beings by which we're automatically elevated to sattva guna. Once we're in sattva guna, then we can cultivate atma gyan. Once we come to atma gyan, then we can cultivate bhakti. So this verse is pointing out to us what is the result of this tattva gyan. The whole chapter, basically, most of the chapter, chapter 2, Krishna has been discussing the nature of atma gyan. He's been discussing the nature of spirit, he's been discussing how to realize that spirit, and now he's discussing the result of that cultivation of gyan. we become deep, like the ocean, profound with awareness, with knowledge, and we become therefore undisturbed. The more aware a person is, the less disturbed he is. A person who's ignorant becomes more disturbed. Shankaracharya, it's an interesting etymology. The word Shudra, we all know what is a Shudra. Shudra means, according to Shankaracharya, somebody who is constantly lamenting. Shochati, Kankshati. These represent ignorance and passion, respectively. So the Shudra is somebody who's crying about something that he assumes that he deserves, or about someone that he assumes has wronged him, or about something, always something. Always something, always vocal. That means Shudra. The passionate person is Kankshati, running around like anything, scrambling to get so many desires fulfilled. And Krishna says here, Shantam apnoti na kama kami. That person can never attain peace. Now there's a nice couplet that we get in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that encapsulates all this very nicely. Bhukti mukti siddhi kami shakalaya shanta. Krishna bhakta nishkama ataiva shanta. That means that the person who wants bhukti, the bhogi, or the passionate person we've just described, kankshati, that person is running around trying to fulfill desires. He'll not be peaceful. Because desires are what nature? Unlimited. Dushpudenanalenacha. The more you pour fuel onto fire, the more that fire becomes agitated. So it is with desires. So that person is immediately disqualified. What about mukti kami, the person who realizes that this is a futile process? Trying to engage with the mode of passion is never going to work. So what does he do instead? He wants out. He wants to escape through gyan, or through whatever will allow him to escape. That person is called the mukti kami. He wants liberation. That person, even Prabhupada points out here in the purport, even up to the point of liberation, they also cannot be satisfied, because until they're liberated, they're agitated. What is it that motivates them for liberation except the perpetual frustration of material existence? And they can't stand that. So they remain agitated until they get liberated. And siddhikami, they're kind of a in-between status, the yogis. What do they want? They want siddhis. When I was in Hardwar many years ago, there I saw there was a big crowd of people on the bank of the Ganga. So I was curious. It's not hard to draw a crowd in India. So I was curious, and I just went to see what's happening. So one yogi had come out of the water, and someone handed him an empty bottle. We used to have limca. I don't know if we still have limca here. This is in the old days. So he took this bottle of limca standing up in his palm, and he went like this. And he turned it into powder. And then he poured it out on the sand. And all the crowd was very impressed. You see? So he had some siddhi. Siddhi means basically magic tricks. Either you get it through cheating, or you get it through actually following the disciplines of yoga. But basically it really amounts to not much more than magic tricks. What are you going to do with that kind of thing? I can turn a Coke bottle into churna. Put that on your CV. So these are the siddhikamis, and until they get the siddhi, they will ardently keep trying. They're not peaceful either. Now, what distinguishes a devotee from these? Because we see devotees are also working very hard. Devotees are also praying very hard. They're desiring things very, very strongly. So what is it that distinguishes a devotee from the karmi, from the jnani, and from the yogi? Who knows?
The desire is not personal.
The desire is not his own desire. It is Krishna's desire. He has embraced this other person's desire. Not any other person, the Supreme Person. And Krishna is described in the Shruti mantra, Satya Kama, Satya Sankalpa. Whatever he decides, instant fact, just like that. All of his sarva shaktis, They immediately come together, they fulfill that desire. As soon as he desires it, it's done. We would love to have that position, wouldn't we? That's why we're in this material world. So, and that's why we're unpeaceful, because we are not the Supreme Person. The position is already filled. There's no vacancy. Sorry. Even next time it won't work. You got to give it up. So, this is the devotee. Krishna Bhakta Nishkama. This is what it means to be Nishkama. Nishkama doesn't mean absolutely nothing that he's striving for or feeling about or thinking and feeling and willing. Rather, it means that he has given up doing these things for non-devotional purposes, especially not for his own purpose. Therefore, he's peaceful. Now, Rupa Goswami has given us a very nice analogy in this regard. When we go to see a drama, nowadays nobody goes to see a drama unless you're Marathi. And what do we do instead? We go and see movies. Or we download them. You don't even have to go to theaters anymore. Now you can just download them. You can download any kind of movie you want nowadays. It's dangerous. But that's another question. The point is, when you watch a movie, you become absorbed in that movie. And you begin to identify with the characters of that movie to some degree or another. But it's found, I don't know about here in India, certainly in the United States of America, it's very popular to have war movies, military movies. People see things getting blown up. They see people getting shot to pieces. They see all kinds of blood and guts, basically. And they like it. This is enjoyment. How is it so? Because you're not directly involved. You're sitting in a detached, comfortable position. This is spiritual happiness. And Krishna's Leela, Rupa Goswami says, is just like that. Not always a war movie, of course. Here at Kurukshetra it happens to be a war movie. But when we see a drama or when we see a movie, we're sitting as a detached observer and we enjoy the activities vicariously. That means from a detached perspective. And so in Krishna consciousness also we embrace desires, but they're not our own desires, they're Krishna's desires. And because Krishna's desires cannot be frustrated, therefore our desires cannot be frustrated as long as we cling on to his desires. What happens when we cling on to our own desires? We will continue to cling on to them wherever those desires go. Generally they go into oblivion. And so do we. This is the problem. So this is Krishna consciousness means we have desires, we have activities, we have strong feelings, everything that we are seeking in this material world, but because they're all in connection with the Supreme Person whose will cannot be thwarted under any circumstances, therefore we never feel the frustration that typifies material activities, material desires, material feelings, etc. So this is how Prabhupada concludes his purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, a few acharyas also, they point out, what is it, what are these rivers that are flowing into the ocean? What do those rivers represent in our metaphor?
Desires.
Not always desires, but he talks about sense objects. By dint of our prarabdha karma, so many sense objects will come in contact with our senses. Even we don't desire them. We make no attempt to gain them, but they come to us. You get a knock at the front door and you answer the door and somebody hands you a big plate of Mahaprasadam. Of course, that's not just material sense gratification, unless you're very insistent. But the point is that it's pleasing to the senses. Happiness comes to the senses automatically in this world in accordance with our karma. No matter how hard we struggle, we're never going to earn 1 rupee more than is already written on our forehead. Likhitam api lalate pranchitam kaha samartha. Hitopadesh tells us. Your fate is already written on your forehead in some sort of indelible barcode that only the devas can read. And when it's time to administer your prarabdha karma, they just look at your forehead and they understand, okay, send him this, send him that, send him this, send him that. When these things come to us as a result of our own past actions, either we get bewildered, we become ebullient and giddy and foolish, and engage in the process of sense gratification without regard to Krishna. Or if it's bitter fruit instead of a sweet fruit, so to speak, then we suffer and we get angry and we feel depressed and so many things. These are the two things that happen. It's like fruits. The example is given. Karma bij. Bij. Bij means a seed. There are so many kinds of seeds in this world, isn't it? Anyone ever seen, well, they don't have avocado trees here in India, at least not yet. Avocado seed is about this big, very large. How big is a poppy seed? Anybody? Tiny, tiny, tiny. And there's everything in between. All different kinds of seeds. You plant them, they all fructify at different rates. They all produce different plants. They produce different kinds of trees or plants and flowers. They produce different kinds of fruits. Some of those fruits are poisonous. Castor bean, that's the source of the most poisonous substance that we know. Ricin comes from castor oil plant. It grows everywhere. Don't eat them. And some of them are very sweet. Coconuts, mango, papita, nice things are all roses, also very sweet. So karma is just like that. And whatever we have performed in the past, we will eventually eat the fruit. So this is the idea. When we get nice things, we become foolish and we become encouraged in the process of Maya, and we dive deeper into the process of sense gratification and entangle ourselves further. And when we suffer the natural consequences of what we've done, who knows how many millions of years ago, then we become jaded, or we become depressed, or we become angry, or we become overwhelmed by tamoguna, and we suffer. So Gyan is meant to elevate us beyond this. So they say that all these rivers entering into the ocean, which is the mind of the Gyani, achala pratishtam, immovable ocean, apuryamanam, even though it's already full, it's still being filled more, and yet it doesn't come outside of its limits. When our minds become like that, still, peaceful, deep, immovable, achala, then we get peace. So prarabdha karma can send us any number of things. We have to simply tolerate. So it comes full circle. More tolerant than a tree, more humble than a blade of grass, ready to offer all respects to others, not expecting any honor in return. This is the substrate of the house of bhakti. When you want to build a large mansion, you have to build a strong foundation. The foundation of the house of bhakti is this tattva gyan. And we've already described the foundation of tattva gyan itself is piety. As long as we are pious, then we can cultivate gyan. And as long as we have gyan, we can progress in bhakti with minimal obstruction. So these things will all be discussed in the next chapter and in the following chapters as well. For now, this analogy, I think, is maybe clear. If anybody has any question or comment, we can discuss. No questions or comments? In that case, I'm very busy and I will go. Okay, one question. George say.
Desires are a result of prarabdha karma only?
Desire. Are desires the result of prarabdha karma? This is a very good question. in a sense, you can say that desires are the result of prarabdha karma. Or, not exactly prarabdha karma, sorry. Desires are the product of aprarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma means the fruit that you're either eating or spitting out, depending on whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. But karma has different stages, just like a seed. A seed that is planted in the ground, a seed that has sprouted but not come up, a seed that has come up, a seed that has already blossomed, and a seed that has produced fruit. Those are all different stages of the same entity. So karma is also like that. When we're talking about an activity that has not yet borne the fruit in the form of a pleasant or unpleasant reaction, that carries with it the psychological stain of its original precipitator, which is to say, when we engage in any particular activity, it leaves a karmic mark on our psychology. Particularly this is true of very pious activities, and it's also true of very sinful activities. Both of them are very strong in their respective fields. So if we have pious samskars, then that gives birth to pious desires in the future. We may not even remember where those desires are coming from. Usually we don't. If we have been very sinful in the past, that gives rise to very sinful desires also. In that sense, the desires are the result of our karma. Not prarabdha karma, but aprarabdha karma. Is that clear? So this is another reason why it's important to become pious. This is the initial stage, preliminary stage of Gyan, which is the preliminary stage of bhakti. To become pious is very important. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta. We want to become dvandva moha nirmukta, liberated from the dualities and the bewilderment of material desire in general. This is the idea. As long as we are engaged in any kind of material activity, but especially in sinful activity, these desires are never going anywhere. And it will be very difficult to cultivate spiritual life. We have to be pious. This is the point. Is that okay? All right, one more.
Yes, desires. When a new person comes to the movement and he sees everybody chanting and this is really like chanting and he takes a darshan of deities, then he had the desire that I should have also deity in my house, I should serve the deity. And he brings the deity and he serves the deity sometimes. So how a new person he can serve the deities just like we do Abhishek and other things. So how a new person can guide them?
Well, I don't think that this is exactly part of the class, but in general, we have to accept the guidance of a spiritual master or his representative. And these kinds of things can be arbitrated according to time, place, and recipient by that person. I would say that's the easiest answer for this question. Is that okay?
But sometimes the desires of the person, he says, just I want to have a Laddu Gopal in my house, so I want to take care of it. So how that person he will do with the things? How his desires can be?
He should accept a spiritual master. He should work under the direction of that spiritual master. And the spiritual master will tell him, do this, don't do that, do it this way, don't do it that way, like that.
Is it necessary that Diksha Guru or spiritual master means a Siksha Guru?
Either one,
Either.
both is best. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.